Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our fourth Family Education Night of the 2024-2025 school year. This is one session in a series of 6. My name is Kristen Parson, and I am the IEP liaison for Northstar's Career Center. I'd also like to introduce Holly Peel, who is the director of the Career Center. At the Career Center, we work with juniors, seniors, and young adults with disabilities to help them build work readiness skills they can use as they transition out of secondary education and enter the workforce. You can learn more about the different fields that we offer programming in on the Career Center tab of Northstar's main website, or you can reach out to us directly via email, and we will be sure to post that contact information in the chat shortly. We are also very happy to have a couple of guest speakers with us this evening who have given a great deal of their time and expertise to Northstar. Our first guests are Kelly Magee and Emma Ritzstein, and they are joining us from Courage to Succeed, a post-secondary skill building program offered through the Family Services nonprofit UMFS. In this program and with their team's support, many Northstar alumni have been able to find measurable post-secondary success. Our second speaker is Paula Buckley. Paula has been working with the nonprofit organization GRASP since 2008. There, she works hard to help students and their families navigate the financial aid process and connect them with scholarship opportunities. Paula has worked with our students and families for 16 years. She's available to meet with you, Northstar families, to help them obtain financial aid for post-secondary programs. Please keep that in mind as she speaks and let us know if you need any help getting connected with her. We also appreciate the support that GRASP offers Northstar in the form of a scholarship competition that is awarded to one graduating senior each year. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Kelly and Emma, and the rest of us are going to turn off our cameras. Please remember that you are welcome to chat any questions or comments that you may have, and that there will be an opportunity to ask additional questions at the end of tonight's presentations.
Thank you, Kristen. As Kristen mentioned, I am Kelly Magee, and I'm the program supervisor for the Courage to Succeed program at UMFS. I'm joined by Emma Rutstein, who is our therapist for the Courage to Succeed program, and we're going to toggle back and forth on sharing information about our program and the transition from high school to college, if that's a path that you all choose to take. First, I'm going to get started and talk a little bit about the Courage to Succeed program. So we are a college and transition support program for students with neurological differences. We have various supports that we offer, anything from academic supports to psychosocial, independent living, and career and job supports. We're going to go through various information in these areas, and then at the end, if you have questions, we can share that information with you. So for our academic supports, we offer supports both at Reynolds Community College and Brightpoint Community College. We also have a student that graduated from Reynolds Community College and is now a VCU college student. So we offer supports at all of those college campuses. We also, part of the academic supports, offer course advising and registration with a caveat. We don't work directly for the college itself, but I have been with the program for 12 years and have been working really closely with Reynolds Community College specifically for those 12 years. So I do know a lot of the faculty and staff very well at the college and can advise on which staff works really well with our students. Not saying that all of them don't have great structure, but I know which ones have worked well with our students in the past and can advise to take those classes. Also, just getting them connected with the advising office, maybe going with them to those registration meetings and advising meetings to help navigate that process as well. We work really closely with the Office of Student Accommodations at all of those campuses. So the accommodations process is quite different than it would be in high school. So we make sure that they are walked step by step through that process and have that connection. And not only are connected with the office, but are making sure that those accommodations are being used in the classroom as well for each of their classes. Part of the academic supports is the student meets with me for academics at least once a week for 30 minutes to an hour to go through their Canvas. That's the portal that we use for all the colleges use. Go through their Canvas portal and make sure that they're staying on top of their assignments and breaking down larger assignments into smaller ones, more manageable, kind of just making it easier to navigate than just kind of throwing them into trying to navigate that on their own. But also in the academic planning meeting, we can talk about any struggles in the classes, maybe just being a second set of eyes to make sure that they're not missing assignments, anything that would help it make an easier process and just an easier transition from high school to college. We also have ongoing contact with the college instructors. So I'll talk about this a little bit later, but we send out a letter at the beginning of the semester, well, the students do, to each of their professors to let them know that we are a part of um, their support system and that we can communicate with the professors with them. So we can go with them to meetings with their professors, to the college itself, maybe financial aid, but just be an extra person there for that support and helping them with self-advocacy skills. We also offer tutoring through UMFS. We have wonderful volunteers that come in that once a week on various subjects to help our students in the various subjects. And then we could also get them connected with the college tutoring center. So if they need to, they can double dip kind of with the college and with our volunteers that work at UMFS. We have designated study hall times at our UMFS campus. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, we are at UMFS, so which is at Broad and Hamilton, and we're doing our groups, our skill building groups, which Emma and I are both going to talk about a little bit too. And I guess I should backpedal a little bit is the structure of our program. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, the students take classes, and then Tuesdays and Thursdays, we're at our UMFS campus. And during that time in between groups, we have designated study hall times where it's kind of an accountability time with the structured time for study hall, but also Emma and I are there to kind of help them break down the assignments and understand what's going on. If they have questions here and there, we're there for that support. And then we also offer organizational and study skills training. So making sure that they're organizing their assignments and having that structure for study hall or study skills to be able to manage their classes. Another group that we offer on Tuesdays and Thursdays is our independent living skills. So some of these, this is just a small amount of what these would look like, but we offer skills in, I'm sorry, independent living skills are some of our groups that we offer are like financial planning, household maintenance. I don't know, I did a group on winter readiness, anything that you would think of that would be an independent living skill, the things that you need to plan as you transition from high school or into adulthood. Some other independent living supports that we offer are self-advocacy. So like I mentioned earlier of us going with them to meet with professors, we're practicing those self-advocacy skills. If they're getting their accommodations, they're advocating what their needs are to be able to be successful in the classroom as well. We help the students with career exploration and planning. So helping choose what career path that they want. We might help them with some career assessments, or we're going to talk about the summer internship program and those career explorations as part of that as well. But we can have one-on-one meetings with the students and the families and help them connect with DARs and things like that to make sure that they're on the right path and figuring out what it is that they want to do after college as well. And I'm going to hand it over to Emma to talk about psychosocial supports.
Thank you. So the reason that I'm here is to talk about my role as a therapist. Courage to Succeed is a holistic program, and we have a therapist because the transition out of high school is difficult, neurodiverse or not. It's a really hard time and period in a lot of people's lives. And so we like to have somebody on staff that's going to support that transition academically and beyond. Any barrier that arises that could stand in the way of student success. So in addition to the independent living skills group that Kelly was mentioning, we offer other groups on Tuesdays and Thursdays, a social skills group, where we talk about topics related to conversation skills, communication professionally, interview skills as we get closer to the summer if students are exploring internships, or maybe getting their first part-time job or full-time job after graduation. We have a peer support group, which is a student-led group where students share what's been going on in their lives, any issues that they're having, concerns that they want to bring to their peers so they can not only practice those skills and grow some understanding from others, but really lean into the independence that we see in a lot of our students as they continue on with the program. So similar to Kelly, who meets with students individually to discuss academics, I meet with students weekly, again, to talk about anything going on in their world. It could be mental health related or not, any barriers to success, to celebrate wins, see how we can continue to grow and be successful. Another group that we have is our mindfulness group. We talk a lot about regulation skills, coping strategies when things get difficult that we can use on campus, off campus, independently, or with others. And then finally, we have our healthy relationships group, which revolves around any and all relationships. So this is where we'll talk about healthy relationships with professors and what that looks like, connecting with peers on campus, maintaining positive relationships with our friends from high school, our parents. Again, as we grow and we transition into a new phase in our life, a lot of our relationships, the roles that we have, look a bit different. And so it's great to go over what those could look like, how we can improve them if there is something to improve, or maintain them to be as successful and helpful as they can be. And finally, we have our current events group where we talk about what's going on in the world. It's fun to share with one another inspiring stories, things that we learned, just talk through current events. We also really encourage our students to take part in campus clubs and activities. VCU, both Reynolds and Brightpoint have many activities that they put on throughout the course of the semester. And we share that information with students weekly and their families to give them an opportunity to join in on the fun. So over when fall and spring aren't happening, some of our students do take a summer course maybe, but over the summer, largely what we're doing is internships, which we're going to talk about next. But this past summer, we started a summer camp series that we are really excited about and had a lot of fun doing. This is a skill building camp series that covers 4 different areas. So we had a week of independent living skills. We did a cooking class, for example, during that week. That was a lot of fun. We have a workplace readiness skills. We heard from a lot of different professionals in different fields during that week. We have our high school to college transition, where we can tour campuses, talk about what college can look like, how we can set ourselves up for success. And then we capped off our camp series with a social activities week. So enjoying time with one another, using some of those social skills that we talked about, putting them into action. We went to the pool, we saw a movie, a trampoline park. We had a lot of fun with one another, and we're excited to have the series again this upcoming summer. And then, like I mentioned, over the summer, we do have a summer internship program. So Kelly and I support students who participate in connecting with a local business, a local organization. We have some past opportunities listed below. So like Hilton Hotels, one for all artists, Maymont Nature Center, Making a Difference for You, VDOT, And then we also take advantage of all the wonderful things that UMFS, our larger organization, has on campus, so that our students can take all of those great practical skills that they're learning in their classes, and the passion that they have for a specific area, and use that in real life. So for example, we have a student who is going to be studying environmental science. So Maymont Nature Center was in her wheelhouse, and she really enjoyed being able to make the connection between her learning and practical uses. So like I said, this work experience, whether it be an internship or, like I mentioned, I think previously, we do support students in gaining employment. It allows us to apply the knowledge that we're learning, whether it be in our groups, be on campus in classes, and from that, learn a lot of great transferable skills, soft skills, hard skills being maybe we have students interested in computer programming, maybe being able to put that into practice. And then some of those soft skills, professionalism in the workplace, self-advocacy, email writing, all of those things that can be used professionally and then otherwise, that are really great to have. It's also a good time to practice some of those workplace social skills. So yes, I'm going to pass it back over to Kelly to talk about why college.
So yeah, now that we've talked about our Courage to Succeed program, I'm talk about why college might be a next step for some young adults. So for many, it builds independence. A lot of people learn more about who they are in college, and it creates opportunities to socialize. So with this big transition, there may be some things to look out for. Some of our young adults may not be used to this independence. It's a lot different than high school. It's a lot less structure than a high school setting and more intense coursework than high school. And I say all this because I'm going to talk about that is exciting as well. Some other challenges are that it might be difficulty socializing. Some of our students might have difficulty with self-advocacy, the autonomy of college. Like I said, it's a lot. You have to be a lot more independent, and the increased anxiety and difficulty to respond. Increased anxiety and difficulty responding to it. And I say all of this, like I said, is it is an exciting major change in life. Transitioning from high school to college. So let's talk about some strategies to make it a more smooth and successful transition. I don't say all that just to scare people. It's just let's talk about how we can work together on some strategies to make it a more successful transition. So the good thing about college is you can pick your own schedule of classes. So working with our program or maybe they're working with you all, they can pick their classes. Many of our students start with one course in college and maybe work their way up to a couple more. Or maybe they stay with that one class because that's what works for them. So it's a great thing that you can decide what works for you. And the participation encouraged to succeed, we don't care how many classes you take. We will support you in one, we'll support you in four. So whatever works best for you. This is just an example of a schedule. So for example, this student is taking classes on Mondays and Wednesdays, and it's a history class from 11:20 to 12:45, and then they go straight into English class from 1 to 2:25. That means they have their mornings, they have their afternoons, and then maybe Tuesdays and Thursdays they're at Courage to Succeed, but they've chosen these classes back to back. Or they could choose a class that's first thing in the morning, take a little bit of a break for lunch, and then have a class in the afternoon. Another strategy is effectively managing your time with your college schedule. So establishing a daily schedule for yourself. I know the community colleges and VCU both have Google calendars, so they, as their college email address is a Google email address, and so they are a Gmail, so they get to use the Google Calendar. Canvas is great too, which is the online portal. And many of the professors will, when they put assignments in Canvas, it will automatically go to the student's Canvas calendar. And so once you complete an assignment, it marks it right off and you can move on to the next. So managing that calendar, and you can add your own personal things onto it too, and coming up with those schedules. Another strategy is prioritizing your most important tasks first. And then being proactive with your supports. So for prioritizing your most important tasks, so in college, some assignments are worth more points than others. This is probably the case in high school as well, but maybe you have a 15-point discussion board post that is due tomorrow, but you also have a 100-point exam that is due tomorrow. Yes, we don't want to miss out on either, but prioritizing getting that exam done before the discussion board post would boost your grade a little bit more. But those are strategies that we work on with our students too. Also, prioritizing upcoming deadlines. I have a test tomorrow and I have a 5-page paper due next Friday. I want to study for that test tomorrow, and then we can start tackling that paper. So just figuring out your schedule and when you should complete the assignments based on their deadlines is also important. Being proactive with your supports. So yes, I've been mentioning Courage to Succeed program. We like to think that we're a great support program for our students, but not everybody uses Courage to Succeed, and that's fine too. So reaching out to tutors and professors or your advisor if you're struggling in a class. Your first go-to would be reaching out to your professor. And we can help with that if you're encouraged to succeed, or as we encourage those self-advocacy skills, having students send emails or going to office hours with their professor. And then they can help you or suggest tutors. And if it gets to be bad enough, maybe meeting with an advisor, talking about either not finishing that class or taking a different class in the future so that you're more in sync on what you should be taking. I mentioned earlier this evening about free tutoring at most colleges. So Reynolds, Brightpoint, and VCU all offer tutoring, free tutoring, quote unquote, comes with your tuition. And then we also offer tutoring through Courage to Succeed. And then also reaching out to your Office of Student Accommodations. Yes, they're there for the accommodations piece. So making sure that you have those in place in the classroom. But if you're struggling, they have resources and can point you in the right direction if things are getting tough. They might be able to have that rapport with the professor and help you navigate that conversation if you're not in a program like Courage to Succeed. They're wonderful people, and I enjoy working with them. Speaking of accommodations, the process is different than in high school, where you have things like 504 plans or IEPs. In college, it is a student-led thing. So if you need accommodations in college, you need to reach out to their accommodations office. Student accommodation, or I'm sorry, Office of Student Accommodations is what's called at Reynolds, and the Student Accessibility Services is what it's called at Brightpoint. And then SAEO, I forget what it stands for, is at VCU. So they all have disability services offices. You need to do this at least 3 weeks prior to the semester, sooner if possible, just because it's a process of filling out their information online, getting them the proper documentation to support your disability, and then there will be an intake meeting. So giving yourself enough time to be able to do that is really important. Once you fill out the information online, they will reach back out to you for an intake meeting. And then a good thing is, once you've applied, you don't need to reapply for accommodations. There are different processes for each college. We have to navigate that with the 3 different colleges and requesting those each semester, but they're starting to streamline it. Reynolds finally bought into just sending them out without us requesting them every semester. Brightpoint already does that, and so does VCU. So hopefully they'll all be on the same page of that. Once you've got your accommodations and they're in the system, accommodations office will automatically send them to the professor each semester. With that being said, after your accommodations is sent to your professor, it's a good idea to have a conversation with your professor to let them know what works best for you in the classroom. They have the documentation, but they might want to have a conversation with you. You don't have to tell them what your disability is, but just tell them what works for you and how your accommodations are a support for you to be successful. Speaking of communicating with professors, so not only about your disability, at the beginning of the semester, I mentioned earlier, for Courage to Succeed, we have the students send out what we call a professor advocacy letter to each professor. It basically tells each professor this my involvement in support with the student. So we talk a little bit about what Courage to Succeed is, tell them that that work closely with the accommodations office, and that it says that the student gives their permission for us to be in communication with them at all levels. So our contact information is on it, and it's a really great thing for the professors to know that the student is part of Courage to Succeed. We also encourage professional communication for the student with their professors and college staff. So that's part of some of our independent living skills, but also whenever they meet with me for academics, if they need to email a professor or the college, we practice and we send emails together with using professional communication. For professors, we encourage the students to read the syllabus and visit with them during office hours. It builds a great relationship rapport with the professor, shows them that you care and want to be successful in the class, just to show face and use those office hours sometimes. Whether it's that you're struggling in the class or you just want to learn more, we encourage the students to go by and use those office hours. They can also communicate to professors through Canvas if they're not emailing with the professor. In the syllabus, it usually states the professor's communication preference. So we encourage the student to obviously read the syllabus at the beginning of each semester for each professor, but to find out what their professor's communication preference is. Most of the time it's email, but I will say yesterday I discovered one of our students, their professor has a preference of a discussion board post that they want them to pose questions, not personal questions, but questions that can be asked throughout the class as a discussion board post so that the whole class can read it. So reading the syllabus and finding out what the best communication preference is for each professor. Okay. This is just an example of one professor put in their syllabus their email preference and how they want you to email them. So basically saying that I have 90 to 150 students every semester, so I can't keep each email straight. So I need these criteria in each of your emails, and I want it to be professional. I think this is a great practice for each of the students, because not only will they be doing this in college, but in the workforce, making sure that they're professionally communicating with their employees and their coworkers as well. So I liked how this professor set this one up. So disclosure to the college and professors. I mentioned earlier, in order to receive accommodations, you do have to connect with the accommodations office and provide documentation. But for the professor's piece, or if you're talking to college staff outside of the accommodations office, ultimately it's your decision what, if anything, you want to disclose about your disability. And that goes for accommodations. If you don't want to get accommodations, that's ultimately your decision. But we always encourage students to have it there as a backup. So maybe you don't use your accommodations, but they're there to kind of catch you if you fall, or if there are some struggles, you have those accommodations, because once they're there and they can't take them away. So encouraging students to disclose at least to the accommodations office, but you can advocate for your needs without stating your disability. So they don't have to tell their professors that they have a disability, but they, obviously will receive their accommodations letters, but can express to their professor, this is how I learn best. This is how I will be successful in your class. So Emma mentioned earlier that we encourage students to get involved on campus with student life. Each of the campuses have an office of student life. They have things like field trips, clubs, organizations, service projects, sports, and different social events on campus. And we really want, if the student wants to get involved, we encourage them to. If there is a club or a social event coming up that they're a little hesitant of going to by themselves, maybe we can encourage other students to go with them. Or if it's the first time, Emma or myself could at least, get them started with that, get them connected with them. We also, I want to put this out. So Brightpoint and Reynolds have their student life pages, and it tells about all their different student groups and clubs and things like that. So they can look and see if there's something that the students can look and see if there's something that interests them. And there's usually a club for that. And if there's not a club for that, there is a place to start a club. We actually had a student last semester that started a car club because he's really interested in cars, and found 3 other students in our program to start the club, and now he's got a car club. So that's one way to do it. And so part of student life, there are upcoming events that are posted on both of these websites. And Emma sends a weekly email at the end of the week to all of the families, kind of talking about what we've done this past week, the groups that we did, and the topics. But at the end, also post the upcoming events for the different campuses. So if a student's interested in an upcoming event, it's listed, and they can join that. So part of this transition too is socializing and maybe communicating with fellow students. So in order to do that, the campus is a great place to do this. It's a great time in your life to do this. Many people in the community college, in the college, are looking to do the same thing. They're kind of at the same phase in their life that they're starting something new, they're learning new things. So they're going to have similar interests to you, especially if you're in the same classes. So look for people that are in this similar stage of life, or they're in the similar classes as you, and maybe you have a topic that you could talk about. There are various areas throughout the campus where people are more social. So for example, at Reynolds, Burnett Hall is one of the buildings, and there's a cafeteria area there with lots of tables. I say kids, students, young adults hang out there a lot. There's some common areas that people tend to hang out, and that's a great place to meet new people. With meeting new people, just know that it takes time. Be patient. You may not connect with the first person that you meet in your class, and that's okay. You might not connect with the second or third, and that's okay too. Just know that it takes time, and there are people there that have similar interests to you that you can connect with. I say all these things because that we're really excited to share this information with you, and in this exciting transition time in your life. Courage to Succeed is here to support in this transition if you're interested in learning more. But thank you all for listening, and I know we're going to have some questions at the end, but thank you all for listening, and have a great evening.
Thank you guys so much. It's always such a pleasure to have you. And like I mentioned in the introduction, I know we've had a number of students who have gone through your program and found a lot of success there. And I think it really speaks to some of the points that you guys made, right? Whether you have a disability or not, it's a big transition to go from the high school environment to a college environment. And especially with those executive functioning skills that you guys were talking about, like the time management and knowing, what to prioritize and things like that, to have that support for anybody when you're making that transition is huge. I don't see any questions in the chat. I had a couple questions for you guys, if that's okay.
Sure.
The first question, I like that you pointed out, the difference between what it's like to disclose your disability and ask for accommodations when you're in a college setting versus high school. For you, for your programming, how much does the documentation that they have inform like what you recommend they ask for? Is it kind of going off of their 504 or their IEP, or is it more so seeing how they do in that environment and then going from there?
You're talking about the accommodations in college,
Mhm.
correct?
Yeah.
We usually recommend what worked for them in high school and not guaranteeing that you'll still get the same things when you're in college. So there are different accommodations in college. So there may not be as many families are used to or students are used to. There are things like note taking and getting PowerPoints beforehand and being able to record lectures and getting extended time and distraction free rooms for tests and quizzes. But we recommend them communicating with the accommodations office what worked for them in high school. And then the accommodations office can tell you what the college is able to provide.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. That sounds great. Because I guess it's true that not everything is going to be translate directly from
Mhm.
one setting to the other. Um, all of the tips that you gave as well, I thought were really helpful.
Mhm.
And are those pieces, it sounds like that's kind of embedded in the programming that you have. So
They
is that
are.
in a group setting or is that individualized with
Both.
or both? Okay.
Yes, so both. They are mainly, I'm not mainly, they're in both. I guess we can hone in more on the individual when we talk about those areas, but many of those topics and things like that we talk about in our group setting, and then we can reinforce it in our individual sessions with the students.
Okay, great. And then the last question I had, and this might just be, so at the Career Center, we're working a lot on work skills, right? And so we talk a lot about fading support.
Mhm.
When you look at your programming and the college, progressing through the college years, is it built kind of into the programming as well? Is the goal eventually that you guys are kind of pulling back, or like, what does that look like for you?
It is. So we're very individualized with our programming. We offer part-time and full-time programming for us. So part-time would be just academic or just groups on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And then full-time is all of that. So Monday through Friday. Ideally, students start off full-time. So they're Monday through Friday with us and receiving all of those supports. And then as they progress through the program, maybe it's a semester later, maybe it's a couple of years later, they're weaning off those supports. So they might go half time in one of those areas, or, in a wonderful world, they're completely weaned off our services and they are
Okay.
graduating on their own or are moving on to a job without our supports.
Okay. Yeah, that's exciting. That's awesome. I don't have any other questions for myself, and I don't see any other ones in the chat. So thank you guys again so much for your presentation and for all
Absolutely.
those insights and tips and stuff. We are going to go ahead and switch gears over to Paula. And
Okay.
then after Paula's presentation and some of her questions, then again, for participants, we'll give you an opportunity after we stop the recording. If you do have anything specific that you want to ask Kelly, or Emma will have another opportunity at the end of tonight's presentation. Certainly you can continue to pop any questions that you have in the chat.
Wonderful. Oh, I forgot to put up my contact information. Will you be sharing that when I share I guess when I share my PowerPoint. Okay.
Yes, so everyone who's participating tonight will receive a copy of the presentations, and they will also be posted on our Family Education Nights page on the
Wonderful.
Northstar website.
Thank you.
Okay, so good evening, everyone. My name is Paula Buckley, and as mentioned, I work for GRASP, and I'll tell you a little bit about that as I go through my presentation. But our focus, we're a career and college access organization, and our focus is on the financial aid piece for whatever post-secondary education a student is looking to do. Okay. So what is GRASP? We're a nonprofit, as I said, a career and college access organization. We actually serve public schools in Virginia. We're now in like 114 in Virginia. We're also like at Northstar Academy, where I am, as one of my schools. And our advisors in those public settings are typically 1 day a week, working with the high school seniors on the financial aid process. We also have some scholarships at the schools that have advisors. So, you know, if you happen to be listening tonight and you're not particularly in a GRASP school, I'll mention also we do have virtual advising that you could take advantage of. You know, but you do need to have a student in a GRASP school to be able to be eligible for those scholarships. So I won't really talk a whole lot about those. So financial aid. It's a big thing to have to think about. And, you know, for most seniors, when they get to the senior year, they know if they're going to look at college or a program like that, they have to do the application for that. But financial aid is a whole nother little track on the process of whatever post-secondary education a student's looking to do. So, and I'll get further into the FAFSA, free application for federal student aid, which you may have heard about, which is like the big thing that's used to determine what a student's financial aid will be at a particular school. But there are things that are out there now that students can use to see what kind of financial aid they might be eligible for. And this here is one link for the student aid estimator, where you can go in and you plug in some of your financial kind of information, or whatever, and you'll get an idea of what it, you know, takes into account family income and those kinds of things to just see what financial aid the student might be eligible for. When it comes to financial aid, there are various forms. The big one, as I mentioned, is the FAFSA, free application for federal student aid. That's the basis that almost all schools use to first determine what financial aid the student may be eligible for. There's another newer one called the VASA, Virginia Alternative State Aid Application. And that was started a few years ago, and that's for students who, because of their citizenship status, may not be eligible for completing the FAFSA, but they may be eligible for some state of Virginia grants if they're at a Virginia school, and that is the VASA. Another one is called the CSS profile. Certain schools require that. It takes into account a little more detail in the financial aid piece of a family's situation. And, you know, some of the big Virginia schools that do it are William and Mary, UVA, Washington and Lee. So your school, you know, the financial aid page would let you know for sure whether or not the CSS profile is required. And that one is accessed through the College Board website, which is where students, when students have their profile for doing SATs. And then there are various college scholarship applications that are out there, all kinds, all types, all different ways to find them. But these are all types of financial aid forms that students need to complete for the financial aid piece for college. So some of the steps for the process, you know, the big thing is looking at priority filing dates and deadlines. When it comes to the FAFSA, schools have what they call a priority filing date, which is where if you're eligible for certain federal financial aid, you would still get that even if you didn't meet their priority filing date. But schools have what we call institutional aid, their own pots of money. And that's where the priority filing dates come in, so that students, for each school, you can find that on the school's website under the financial aid section. But you want to try to get your FAFSA completed by that date, so that if you happen to be eligible for some of the institutional aid, you have a better chance of getting it if you've got that priority filing date. We encourage people to file whatever forms are required for the schools they're looking to attend, regardless of like your perceived financial aid need. You may not know what you might be eligible for, and don't necessarily get emotionally hooked on one school if finances matter, because you never know what the college financial aid package is going to look like if a student is applying to multiple schools. So we just encourage people to apply where you're interested, see what comes back, and then our advisors can help students and families look at each financial aid package to see, okay, if you attend this one, it's going to, you might still have to come up with this much additional or whatever, because each one is going to be different. They're not all the same. We encourage students to maximize whatever school resources they have through the counseling office, whether that's usually, whether it's scholarship listings that particular school has kind of culled for the students at that school. And also, make sure your student counselor, whatever, knows if there are any special circumstances, because that kind of thing can sometimes come into play when it comes to financial aid. Also, letting the college financial aid offices know if you have certain special circumstances. As we always tell people, that's their job. If they're in the financial aid offices, to work with people. We work with students and families, but then also to start reaching out specifically to the college financial aid office. As I mentioned, we do have virtual appointments. So if if you're interested in that, having a virtual appointment to do the FAFSA, or talk more about the financial aid process, you could do that through our website. I know in the previous presentation they were talking about emails and paying attention to emails that the students get. We can't talk about that enough. Students need to make sure they're looking at the emails that they're receiving from the colleges, because especially with financial aid, you don't want to miss any kind of email that may come in that, if there's an issue that needs to be resolved or something additional that the school needs, we want students to make sure that they're paying attention to those emails that they're receiving. This is a publication that we use when we're talking to students. It's the Opportunities Book. It's put up by ECMC, which is a company. There's an online version that's at that particular link. And it has all kinds of information about financial aid. Like, it's almost like our Bible or our encyclopedia for financial aid, and we provide it to the students so that they have like a resource to look back on it. But as I said, it is available also online for you to be able to get even more detail about financial aid. So when it comes to talking about the financial aid process and financial aid and why completing the FAFSA is important, when you look at a college, they will say that they have a certain cost of attendance. And there's certain numbers that go into what they call their cost of attendance. There are some that are pretty set numbers. Those would be the tuition and fees cost. If it's a four-year college, the room and board cost. And then they have estimates in that cost of attendance for books, personal expenses, and transportation. And when I mentioned that cost of attendance, those first ones, the tuition and fees and the room and board, if it's a four-year school and a student goes to that school, they will get billed, for the tuition and fees, room and board to their student account. The books, personal expenses, and transportation that are part of that cost of attendance, those are estimate numbers. So depending on the courses a student takes or how much they spend on personal expenses or how far they live from the school, that's going to vary the cost, those estimated costs. But the school will have each year what they call their cost of attendance for that particular school. Now, when the student does their FAFSA, it takes into account family size, family income, a couple other variables. There's a formula, and the student will get, after they've completed it, something called their student aid index. It's a number. With the new FAFSA that came out last year, and this is kind of an aside, last year, the new FAFSA that came out, there were lots of challenges and problems with it. It's been updated, revised, whatever, and they really worked hard on it. And this year, the process is much smoother. And it is a bit simpler, and for the most part, people are getting through it faster. So the student will get that student aid index. That number could be it can now be as low as negative 1,500 and anything above that. Just for understanding what the number kind of means, if a student has a negative 1,500 up to a 0, they're eligible for something called the federal Pell Grant. The full Pell Grant amount, like this year, it's a bit over $7,000. So if somebody's in that range, they would be eligible for that full Pell Grant amount. And just for comparison purposes, if they go to a community college, that amount of money would cover a full load of classes and some, if not all, their books. If they go to, a public four-year college, like we're here in Richmond, say BCU, it would cover a portion of tuition and fees. If they went to a private school, say University of Richmond, it would cover an even smaller portion of tuition and fees. But that's kind of what happens with the Pell Grant. And if they're eligible for that, if they apply to multiple schools, they would be eligible for that, the same dollar amount, at each school. If their SAI number were 0 to some, I'm not sure what the cutoff number is exactly, they might get a partial Pell Grant, which means it wouldn't be that full, a bit over $7,000. It could be maybe $2,000 or $3,000. But again, it's a sliding kind of scale. And then above that, they're not eligible for Pell Grant. Another type of federal financial aid is work study. Now, schools might have some jobs that are federal work study, meaning they have a pot of money that is federal money that pays whoever's doing those jobs. And they would get a limit if they're authorized federal work study on their financial aid award, where they would get maybe $1,000 each semester. They have to get one of those work study jobs, work up to that dollar amount, then they stop working, then they come back the next semester and they can work again to their limit. The school may also have some, work study type jobs that are paid for out of their own institutional money, which is another kind. And students who may not be eligible for federal work study, because again, it's based sort of on your SAI number, they may still be able to get a job on campus, that's paid for by the institutional funds. And then by doing the FAFSA, students are eligible for loans, federal student loans. Their first year, they're authorized $5,500, their second year, $6,500, and third and fourth year, $7,500. That's the student loan amount. And just by completing the FAFSA, a student is eligible for those loans. But we encourage students to look at their whole package, and you're not required to take it if you don't need it. Or if you don't need the full amount, you don't have to take the full amount. But if a student does opt to take student loans, there is a tutorial through the Federal Student Aid website that the student has to complete and sign the master promissory note to get those funds. Okay, so what does a college do with that student aid index number? If a student's accepted at a school, the financial aid office will take that cost of attendance number for that school, subtract the student's student aid index number, and the resulting number is that student's demonstrated financial need to go to that school. So say the cost of attendance is $25,000. The student's SAI number is 0. Well, that means their need is $25,000 to go to that school. Now, when the college works up the financial aid award package, it may or may not equal that $25,000. So that's where people, that's where the value of talking to a GRASP advisor can come in. People could talk about, okay, options to try to cover whatever unmet need there is. And that's the kind of thing that we can work with students and families about. But helping people understand what is done with that FAFSA student aid index number and what colleges do, and how they come up with a financial aid award. We talk about the importance of completing the FAFSA, just because if a student doesn't do the FAFSA and they still opt to go to a particular school, as I mentioned, those certain costs at a four-year school will be billed to the student's account. If somebody's able to just pay for it, that's fine. But the FAFSA is, one thing that people can use to also potentially apply for certain scholarships, because some scholarships require that somebody's done their FAFSA. What is financial aid? So there's different types of aid and scholarships. When we talk about free money, the two types are grants, like that federal Pell Grant, and that's determined by having done the FAFSA. There's also scholarships. There's merit scholarships, which oftentimes schools, like through the admissions office, may award merit award or scholarships that way. But then also students apply for scholarships. And if they get those, that's the other kind of what we call free money. You don't have to pay it back. You don't have to pay grants back. And when it comes to scholarships, we tell people you should not ever have to pay to apply for a scholarship. Then that's kind of questionable if they're asking you to pay money to apply for a scholarship. I talked a little bit before about work study and how that is a type of financial aid. And then athletic scholarships. It depends on which kind of college. If a student is going to like a D1 or a D2 school, they might get athletic scholarship money. D3 schools, which is the way they categorize college athletics, they don't offer athletic scholarships, but oftentimes students might get merit aid for attending those schools. And then I did mention the federal student loans. There's two different types, subsidized and unsubsidized. The difference is, again, whether you get subsidized, that's typically determined by what your SAI number is. But the subsidized loans, the interest is subsidized while so interest does not start accruing until they finish school. For the unsubsidized student loans, if they take any loans, interest starts accruing as soon as they start taking them. They don't have to start paying back until they finish their schooling. Parent Plus loan is a type of loan where a parent can apply for any, like, unmet need. But if a parent takes any of the Parent Plus loan, they have to start paying back as soon as they start taking it. And as you can see, the interest rate is a bit higher. So these are some of the steps. One of the things that is required when you do the FAFSA is creating an FSA ID. And one thing that we're finding now with this new FAFSA is that making sure you create that FSA ID before you try to start the FAFSA is preferred. Just because the FSA ID, it takes the student's name, birth date, social security number, and it gets matched against the Social Security Administration. And the contributor or parent also needs to have an FSA ID. So doing that at least a few days before you try to start the FAFSA is preferred. So again, you can file it online. You'll get an email back once it's processed, and students can also, when they have that FSA ID, they can log into their FAFSA to see the status of what their FAFSA is. This is an example of financial aid award. As I mentioned, there's a cost of attendance that the college will have. They'll subtract the student's student aid index number, resulting in what the student's financial need is to go to that school. And then you'll see how it's broken down by fall and spring semester. In this sample, the student has gotten some federal work study allotted. And again, they don't have that unless they apply for one of the work study jobs, get the job, work the hours, they earn a paycheck. So it's not like they can factor that into covering their semester's tuition and fees, because they don't have that money until they earn it. And they get a paycheck every 2 weeks, and it's typically used for their miscellaneous expenses. So again, as you see here, the financial aid package covered $18,300. So there's still some unmet need, whether the parent applies for loans, whether they set up a payment plan with the school, whether they pay some of that with like savings or checking. There's a variety of options. And again, talking to a GRASP advisor, if you need to make a virtual appointment or whatever, that's an option. As I mentioned, the VASA is the Virginia Alternative State Aid Application, and again, it's students who may not be eligible to complete the FAFSA, and there is detailed information about completing that. And again, the GRASP advisor can assist with a student or family that needs to work through that one. Other forms I mentioned earlier too, the CSS profile, that's the one that students can access through their College Board website. And again, it gets into more detail with the family's financial situation. And again, the college website will indicate whether this is required for the particular college. And again, they will have deadlines for completing this. GRASP is a big proponent of the community college system, just because we want people to help. We want to help people get their education, but minimize debt, if that's something they're trying to do. And the community colleges have transfer programs where students can start at a community college, their associate, and then transfer directly to a four-year. So the community college has through this website here, you can see, you can look at some of the transfer grants that are accessible to students. And if a student is looking to do this, they would want to talk to their community college counselor, when they're selecting classes and stuff, to just say, this is the kind of thing I want to try to do, so that they can try to get the best fit of taking the courses they can while they're at the community college before they transfer to the four-year. Virginia also has one, what we call junior college, and that's Richard Bland, which is down in the Petersburg area. Their tuition and fees is a little bit more than a community college, but less than a four-year public college. And they do have dorms and dining halls. So that's another option for students to consider. It's kind of like in between a community college and a four-year college, because they do have the dorms. If students are eligible for free or reduced lunch, they may also qualify for fee waivers for colleges with the applications. Again, communication is key. Reach out to the admissions offices to ask, to see if you happen to be in these categories, to be able to get waivers. As I mentioned before, by completing the FAFSA, the student's eligible for federal student loans. The student doesn't have to have a credit check, to be able to get this. By completing the FAFSA, they're eligible for that. They have fixed interest rates, and the repayment is deferred until the student finishes school. There's typically a 6-month grace period before the students have to start paying back on those loans. But it's an option, for students if they do need funding to be able to help cover the cost. As we've learned more about, the workforce options that exist now, especially through the community college, we try to talk to students about that as well. The community colleges have a workforce side. They also have the side that has college courses. And on the workforce side, students can get career certificates for specific types of jobs. And then the community colleges, with this workforce section, they actually help students get the jobs. And they're focusing really specifically on training for those specific jobs. So it's a great option for a student, who wants to learn how to do a specific type of job, and then, be able to get employment in that. And also there's a lot of grants. There's something called Fast Forward, which has certain kind of grant funding, and those are for workforce credentials that are in high demand. And then also Virginia has something called G3 funding. Again, it's for these career and programs, so that if students are in certain categories financially, they may get a lot of the funding to cover whatever kind of training that they're getting in those areas. This just depicts some of the types of skills and jobs that students might be able to do through those workforce programs. And again, if a student's interested in that, if you go to a particular community college website and just type in like workforce, it'll pull up what's available through that community college. As I mentioned here, G3 and Fast Forward, those are the two types of funding options that equate to these workforce programs through the community colleges. There's also apprenticeships that students can look into, and that's through the Virginia Department of Labor. So there's a website for that here, and you have to kind of look and see, the different types of apprenticeships, and then which companies might be, offering an apprenticeship, and you kind of need to contact them. Sometimes you could just, it's like heating and air conditioning, you could see what's local to you and call them directly and see if they have any kind of apprenticeship program, because a lot of some of the bigger ones have their own programs too, for people that are interested in those types of skills. And that's the end of my program. And if anybody has questions, I can take them.
Thanks, Paula. I appreciate you going through all that detailed information. I know when it comes to finances and jargon and all that, it can be pretty information heavy, but I like the way that you break it all down for us. I think Holly might have a couple questions for you.
I do, and I apologize in advance because it's a nitty-gritty question.
Okay.
One that crosses our desk a lot, and I don't personally have a good handle on it. We have a lot of conversations with families about the process they're going through with their financial advisors, about the advantages of continuing to claim their adult child on taxes versus not. I saw helpfully in your VASA information that a student would have to have filed taxes twice in order to just apply under their income as opposed to their whole family's income. What is the rule for FAFSA?
Okay, the rule for FAFSA is they have a category of questions that determine whether a student is independent. And typically, if a student is under 23 and doesn't have a bachelor's degree, they're not independent, even if the parent isn't paying anything for them. So it's not like people can claim it. And when you do the FAFSA, you'll get to these questions. And basically, you know, if a student is under somebody's got custody of a student, that kind of thing. But people can't really opt to be independent unless they fit the criteria.
Okay, and do you have any experience with students, for example, who are receiving waiver or SSI or SSDI, and how that might affect, how that interplays with eligibility, I guess? Or is it just two parallel systems that are kind of tangled?
As far as being independent,
Mm-hmm.
I think they will probably not be considered independent. I believe it's, that it still goes down to the degree, whether they have a bachelor's or not.
Okay.
is the main criteria. For instance, if a student then graduates and has their bachelor's, then they're independent. If they're a military veteran, they're independent. If they have dependents of their own that they are providing support for, they're independent. So it's these strict, criteria. And that opportunities book lists them. And also, let me see if I can get this off my screen here, this one thing off my screen here. Let's see if I get that. I can put a link that will show independence here.
So it sounds like they're just two parallel systems that may or may not talk to each other. Federal aid versus the Social Security Administration.
Yeah, but there may be questions on the FAFSA relative to if the student's getting financial aid through DARS or whatever. Is that what you're talking about, or what?
I mean, they all kind of cross over, right? So there's financial eligibility through DARS, and if you receive SSI, there's a I hope I'm not misquoting this, DARS people, but that there's a presumption that then you're then financially eligible for DARS services.
Okay.
And typically people qualify for the Social Security support because they are not claimed by someone else's taxes.
Okay, these are the criteria, and I'll share this link. Born before January 1st, 2002, married and not separated, a graduate or professional student, a veteran, a member of the U.S. Armed Forces, an orphan, a ward of the court, a current or former foster youth, in legal guardianship now or in the past, someone with legal dependents other than a spouse, an emancipated minor, unaccompanied and homeless or at risk of becoming homeless. So those are the criteria for FAFSA to be independent.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. I think it's confusing because a lot of our families are addressing this form at the same time they're dealing with SSI and waiver and DARS, and they all seem to have their own system. So it's worth considering. Thank you.
Yeah. And when you get into the FAFSA, I mean, they've simplified it and stuff, so it will probably ask the question to be addressed, but those are the basic criteria for a student. If they answer yes to any of those things I just read or are in that link, then they're independent and they don't provide parent information.
Okay. All right.
Otherwise, they provide parent information.
All right. Great.
I know.
Good stuff.
Because I get some that, people will ask, well, I'm not providing anything for my child anymore. I'm like, well, that's not the determination for being independent.
Mm-hmm.
It's very strict. And for the college financial aid offices, they then have to have documentation. Like if somebody's in that independent category, they have to have certain documentation to back up whoever's in that category.
Okay, that makes sense.
So
yeah.
yeah.
There's some, yeah, Absolutely. Great.
That makes
Thank
sense.
you. Does anyone else have questions?
I don't see any other questions in the chat. So I think with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up tonight's recording. I just want to remind all participants that you are welcome to stay online if you have any personal questions that you would like to ask any of our speakers. We hope that you will tune in next month. We are going to be having our next session on programs that support independent living. And thank you so much for joining us this evening.